Good day. In this video, we're going to discuss how to use verbs. In particular, we're going to focus on verb tenses. Now, the essential question we'd like to answer by the end of this lesson is that how you, as a writer, are able to use verb tenses to convey an accurate sense of time. So the idea of time is very important in using verb tenses. Now, the objectives we'd like you to achieve by the end of this lesson are, first, to be able to understand the 6 basic verb tenses. 2, to avoid unnecessary shift in tenses. 3, to use progressive and emphatic forms of the 6 basic verb tenses correctly. So we're going to focus on these at the end of the lesson, which are the progressive and emphatic forms of the 6 basic verb tenses correctly. Now, what are these 6 basic verb tenses? Well, we use the basic 4 forms of the verb to form the 6 verb tenses. Now let's start with the 4 principal parts of the verb. I'm sure everyone knows that, but just a quick refresher of the 4 principal parts of the verb. Sometimes they are called the verb forms. So we call them also verb forms. Now these verb forms are not tenses. They are the form of a verb in 4 different shapes in English language. They are the present form, such as swim. This is the present form. You have the past form and not the tense, which is swam with an A. And you have the past participle, form of the verb, which is swum with a U. So that's the third form. And the last form, which is the 4th one, is called the present participle. And this is formed by the verb plus ing, which is in this case we call this swimming. Okay? So these are the 4 basic forms or principal parts of the verb, or what we call the verb forms. Now we use them to form the 6 tenses of the verb. Alright, so we're going to discuss how it's done in terms of the conjugation of the verb throughout the whole lesson. So when we talk about tense, we're talking about actually time. And in this case, we have 6 basic times of the verb. You have the present tense, the past tense, the future tense, the present perfect tense, the past perfect tense, and the future perfect. Now, again, time is expressed by the verb, which is called the tense. So tense means the time of the verb, when the verb happened, or when did the verb occur. Now, some examples, we're going to just take a very quick view of the 6 verb tenses. These are the basic ones that we have. The first basic one is a present tense. Example, I practice at least 1 hour each day. And we know this from this signpost, or what we call time post. So we use the simple or the simple present tense. Number 2, we use the past tense when we refer to an action that happened in the past. This is the case of practice with an ed. 3, in the future, we use I will practice again this weekend, which is in the future. 4, present perfect, I have practiced 6 times so far. I'm going to just add an asterisk here because this is one of the most important tenses we're going to discuss in the lesson. 5, the past perfect, I had practiced much before last year. And 6, which is the last basic verb form, we call this the future perfect. By the end of this year, I will have practiced almost 400 hours. All right, so let's start with the first one and describe what it is, how it's formulated, and when do we use it. Let's start with the first one, which is the simple present tense. So the simple present tense has two situations. First, it expresses a habitual action happening on a regular basis. The first one is a habit, right? Something that you do every single day throughout your whole life or for the major part of your life. Example, I study English every day. So we use the word study in the present tense. I'm going to just designate as PT, present tense. Every day is called the time post, and it's very important whenever you want to use the present tense or any tense correctly to look for time posts or to use time posts to use them properly in a sentence. So we always on the lookout for these time posts. Now this time post is very clear. When we use the word every, it means it's what? It's happening on a regular basis. In this case, I use the word study. The second case where it's used is that it's used for scientific or social fact. So when something is a fact and is considered by everyone, or at least the majority of the people around you, as something which is true, we use the simple present. Example, the earth revolves around the sun. It has always revolved and it's revolving now, and it will always revolve. So now we consider the earth revolving around the sun is a scientific fact, therefore we use the simple present tense. Now let's move on to the past tense. Past tense is expressing an action that happened and completed in the past. So there are two cases here. First, it should happen in the past, a particular time in the past, and should have been completed also in the past. If it's not completed in the past, then this is another tense. So it should satisfy two conditions: should happen in the past and should be completed in the past. Okay? Right, so one example is I studied English yesterday night. So the past tense here is this one. This is studied with an IED. And we look at the time post, which is yesterday night. This is a past occurrence, which is yesterday. So it seems that you started studying last night and you ended studying last night. Therefore, we use the past tense. Now, if I want to use the timeline to show you here, so I'm just designate the coordinates here with X and Y, and X points to the future. This is the future. That's the past. All right. Now, the yesterday, this is the present, of course. Present. Yesterday happened here. All right. And I studied at this time and ended at this time, which is yesterday. So I started studying at this time and I ended at this time. Therefore, I use the past tense. Now, to form the simple past tense, it's very easy. All you have to do is to add an ed or d or IED for the regular one. For the regular verb, you have to, of course, memorize them and know the categories. We're going to get back to them in a different lesson. Let's move on to the example here. You have wash, washed, and practice, practice, and study, studied in terms of regular verbs. Now, the future tense. In terms of the future tense, it is used to express an action that will happen in the future. Something did not happen, but will happen in the future. Example, I will study English very soon. Again, will study is your future tense, FT. And the time post in the sentence is very soon pointing towards the future. Again, if you want to use also the timeline. This is the future, that's the past, that's the present. Okay, so this is something that is used to express an action that will happen in the future, anytime in the future. It can be here, or here, or here, anytime in the future. All right, which is in this case very soon. Now we form this by using will plus the verb stem. The verb stem, it means it's the simplest form of the verb. We don't add an s nor ed, nothing there. Just the simplest form of the verb, which is in this case swim, will eat, will drink, will dream, and so on. All right. Now, of course, you can use any other auxiliary that shows the future, such as shall. I shall eat, I shall swim, I shall drink, and I shall dream. Now there is a subtle difference between will and shall, but we're going to discuss them in a different lesson. Alright, so move on to the now. The present perfect tense. This is the most troublesome for most students. The present perfect tense has two conditions. First, it can express an action that was completed at an unspecified time in the past. So unlike the past tense, there is no time which is specified. We know that from the past tense that I studied last night, or I studied yesterday night, right? And then in the present perfect tense, there is no indication for the time. So wherever you want to search for a time pause, you won't find it. If you don't find it, then it might be a present perfect tense. All right. So example, Sam has studied the lesson. You have has studied. This is the present perfect. Perfect. Now notice that I'm searching for a time pause to know when this happened, yesterday, in the future, and the present. We don't know when, so therefore we use the present perfect. So that's the first condition. Again, if you don't find any reference to time in a particular sentence, a standalone sentence of course, then it might be present perfect tense. The other condition is that it expresses a repeated action. So an action which is repeated, not habit, but something that repeats more than once. Example, I have studied the lesson 3 times. This is not a habit, but it's a repeated action. Again, in this case, we use the present perfect tense. We form this by using has for singular and have for plural, or I, plus past participle of the verb to conjugate the present perfect. So you can use the word has flown. Okay, you have has or have flown. And flown is the past participle form of the verb. The past perfect tense is easy, but you need to have two references in the past. Okay? Now, first express an action that took place and completed before another action in the past, which means that you should have two actions, or an action and an occurrence. So it's an action that took place, okay, completed before another action or occurrence in the past. So both of them should be in the past. All right? The action that happened first should be used in the past perfect, while the second action should be used in the simple past tense. So here's the sort of a problem here for some students, because they need to compare them and see which one happened before the other, which one happened and ended before the other occurred in the past. All right? So the one that first happened, we use the past perfect. The one that second happened, occurred, we use the simple past tense. Example, Anna felt a little better after she had taken the medicine. Now we know the whole sentence is in the past. This is the first thing we know. It's in the past. We have the first one, which is the past tense, and the second one, which is had taken. Okay, and the very important word, which is the time pause here, is called, it's the after one. Okay, So this is in this term is a conjunction. After shows that there are two actions, one happened before the other. Okay. Now, which means the second one is the first one that happened, right? So this is the first. And the first one is the second one that happened. So the one earlier in time, we use the past perfect, and when the one which is the closer in time, we use the simple past. Now, if I want to show you that on the timeline, this is the future, that's the present, and this is the past. So that's the past, that's the future, and that's the present. All right? So what happened is that, let's say she felt here, okay? And that's after she had taken. So she had taken that before. Okay? So the action of taking has happened and ended before the feeling of being a little better. Now, if you have two actions that one action happened in the past, but it's still ongoing until another action in the past happened, you might use the same tense. Now, the future perfect tense has the same idea, but in the future. Expresses an action that will take place and be completed before another action in the past. Again, we need to have two things, two actions, or an action or occurrence in the future. All right, so take place and be completed before another action in the future. All right, let's look at the example here. I will have completed my exam before I graduate the high school. Now, if you look at the sentence, it's clearly in the future tense. You have the word, which is the verb, which is graduate. That's an action in the future, but used in the present tense to signify a fact that's going to happen in the future. And then they have the other verb, which is will have completed. Before is the time pause here. Okay, so it's an action that will be completed, will take place, and will be completed before another action in the past. Okay, so if for example I want to show you on timeline here, again this is the future, this is the present, and that's in the back in the past. We don't need the past, but it's important to know when this action will happen. So the first one is I will have completed my exam before I graduate. So I'm going to graduate anytime in the future here. This is the graduation. Graduation in the future. I will have completed. It might be here, it might be here, it might be here, it might be here, it might be any time in the future after the present. It doesn't matter when it started. It might have started a long time before, in the past, before he said this sentence. But what's important is when it will end. It will end in the future here, 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 and here, just before graduation. Okay? So it should have ended before another action in the future. In this case, I use the future perfect tense. Now, how to conjugate that? It's very easy. All you have to do is to add will plus have. There's no has here because you have an auxiliary which is will. And you have the past participle or the verb. Okay? Will have completed, will have swum, will have dreamt, will have opened, will have studied, and so on. Now let's move on to the progressive forms. We're done with the 6 basic forms. Let's move on to progressive forms. Progressive forms are actually sort of an extension to the 6 basic forms. Another term is the difference between them is that in the progressive one, we focus on the ongoing action. That the action is not interrupted. Not interrupted. Okay? Some of the books call these continuous, present continuous. Whatever they call it, it's the same thing. So it might be called progressive or might be called continuous. Okay? Right, so what is it? what does the present progressive signify? It expresses an ongoing action taking place at the moment of speaking or listening. So for example, if I say something now, I am explaining the lesson, I am explaining the lesson. That's the present progressive. So it's an ongoing action that is happening at the time I said the sentence. Okay? Example, I am working on a big project right now. So you have am working, this is the present progressive, and the time pause is right now. It's very important, it shows that it's action that's happening right now. Excuse me. We form this by using the present form of the verbs to be, which is am, is, are, and then we add an ing towards the end of the verb, which is on the end. Here we have working, studying, swimming, bringing, and so on. Okay? The past progressive form of the verb, again, it shows an ongoing action. Notice the repetition of the word ongoing in the progressive that took place in the past. So it's something that took place in the past. Example, I was working on my project at 8 o'clock last night. See the difference between I worked on my project at 8 o'clock last night and I was working. The emphasis is on the continuity of the action in the past. So if I want to show you on the timeline the difference between them, that's the past. Let's say if I said I worked on my project at 8 a.m. last night, this is the working. That's 8 o'clock. So when I say I worked on my project, it means I might have worked 1 minute, 2 minutes. But continuous action, progressive, past progressive, that's happened in the past. This is 8 o'clock. So I might have started working 8 o'clock until 9, 8 to 30, but it shows the continuity of the action. The form is formed by the past form of the verb to be, which is was, were, and plus ing of the verb. So we can see that here, which is was working, can be were working, and plus the verb, which is the work, and ing. The future progressive, again, focuses on the continuity of the action, but that will take place in the future. Okay? So, an example here, Kyle will be working on his project during summer vacation. Will be working, shows continuity. And you have the during summer vacation, this is the time post here. And if I want to show you that on the timeline, that's the future. And that's the summer vacation. It's when we talk about during, it's a interval. So that's the summer vacation from here until here. Okay, that's summer. And it seems that he's going to be working during, it might be during all the summer or part of it, but it shows continuity of the action. Okay. So it might be throughout the whole summer or part of it, but it shows that it's continuous. If I said Kyle will work on his project during summer vacation, I'm saying that he will work on it. I'm not saying that he will be working on it. I'm not focusing on the continuity of the action, that it's an interval of action in the future. I'm just saying that he will do it. Okay? So see the subtle difference between them is that in the future tense, I'm showing an action that's going to happen in the future. It most probably is a short action, but if I want to signify a long one, and I want to just make sure that it's a continuous one, not interrupted one, then I'll use the future progressive. If an action is a short one, or it's not continuous, it's obstructed, or it's intermittent, then I use the future tense. So again, the conjugation is will plus be plus ing of the verb. Again, it's very easy to conjugate it. It's will shows the future, be shows the present, and ing plus verb is the present participle. Let's move on to the more complex ones. They are the present perfect progressive. If you recall the present perfect, now it's the same thing as present perfect, but now again we focus on the continuity of the action. So it expresses an ongoing action again that happened in the past and continues to the present. So still true in the present. Okay? So Mary has been working on this project for 3 weeks. So here, on this project for 3 weeks, and this is the interval. Notice that it always comes with intervals. So I'm going to show you on the timeline here. So let's say this is the present. This is the time I'm speaking this sentence. That's the present. And these are the 3 weeks interval. Now what shows here is that the work is continuous and is still true until the present. Okay? If I said Mary has worked on the project for 3 weeks, it means that she might have started in the beginning of 3 weeks and then did some work after 1 week, after 2 weeks, and so on until the present. But these are not continuous. They might be intermittent. So again, the subtle difference between them is that the progressive focuses on the continuity of the action throughout the 3 weeks. Okay? Again, we form it by using has or have plus been, which is the past participle of be, plus the ing of the verb to show the continuity. Okay? The past perfect tense, again, past perfect progressive, it expresses an ongoing action, again, in the past that is interrupted by another action. So here, again, we need to have 2 actions or an action and occurrence. But the second one interrupts the first one. Okay? Example. Jury had been painting when the storm started in earnest. So we have 2 verbs here, had been painting and started. And you have the time post, which is when. Okay? So it seems that you have 2 actions happening at the same time, and one is interrupting the other. They're not incongruous. They're not happening simultaneously, but in conjunction with each other, but they are sort of in conflict with each other. All right? When you want to show a sort of conflict or interruption, then we use the past perfect progressive in the past. Now, the first one is had been painting. The second one is started. Now, why do I use the past perfect here and not here? Simply because of 2 things. First, the first one is longer. The action is longer than the second one. The starting of the storm is not as long as painting the painting or doing the action of the painting. Second, most probably the first one has started before the second one of the interruption. So I can just show you on the timeline again. Okay, so that's the past. That's the had been painting. Had been painting. Okay, so it seems that it's a continuous action in the past. We don't know what it will end in the past, but we know that there's an action that is interrupting it at this time, a particular time here. So here's where this storm started. Okay, and notice the starting the poem is a shorter action than this one, and in this one, starting the storm has happened after the first action. All right. So another example, we might say, for example, I had been studying for my test when the bell rang. Again, the first one I had been studying for my test. It's a long action, and the other action is shows that this is the second one, which is interrupting the first one, and then the second one is a shorter action after the first one. Okay, so how to conjugate that? It's had plus been plus ing or the verb. Let's move on to the last one, or the progressive, future perfect progressive. Expresses a future ongoing action that will have taken place by a stated future time. Okay. Example is a very good indication here to just help you with that. By this time next week. Again, the whole thing is a time post. Okay. So it's a future occurrence. By this time next week, Ahmad will have been working as a more security personnel for 3 months. Okay. Occurrences here. I have the occurrence of the by this time next week, and will have been working as a more security personnel for 3 months. I'm going to show you that on timeline. That's the future, right? So this is, let's say this is next week, this time next week, and will have been working for 3 months. Of course, this is the present, and he should have started in the past. And since the action is ongoing, he started in the past and it's continuing until a particular time in the future. Now, of course, his working as a security personnel would be continuing after that, but by this time he would have served for 3 months. All right. It doesn't matter when it started. It might have started in the future as well. It doesn't matter. All right. I can say, for example, by this time next year, Ahmed will have been working as a more security personnel for 3 months. So I know that in the future he's gonna start working as a security personnel after 9 months, for example, and he might have started in the future and continues towards the future as well. Okay, so what matters is when it will end, or when it will something can be labeled in the future. It doesn't matter when it started. We can form this by using will plus have plus been plus ing or the verb. Let's move on to the emphatic form. Emphatic form is very easy to explain here and understand. It's used to show emphasis or force. So if I want to emphasize on a particular verb, I just use the emphatic form to enforce it. Example, in present use do, we can say I do swim every day. I could have easily said I swim every day. But if I want to emphasize that I'm swimming every day and it's a habit, I use the emphatic form of the verb and I add do before swim. Okay? I can also do the same thing with the he. He does swim every day. We did laugh at his jokes. Okay, that's in the past tense. So again, we used do or does in the present and did in the past. That's if you want to add the emphatic form. Many cases in the question forms, we call them also emphatic. Do parents help their children with their assignments? Again, this is called emphatic in the question form. And in negative forms also, we can call them also emphatic. The children did not swim during the rain, and not is the negation of swim. Okay? The last one, which is very important, especially for your essays, because we notice that many essays of the students are full of illegal shift in tenses. Now, illegal shift in tenses that where you shift from a tense to a tense without justifying it. It's important to shift sometimes if you want to show a sequence from the past to the future to the present and so on. But many times students do shift between the past and the present and the future and the perfect without actually showing the sequence there, without legally showing that sequence. And so we call this illegal shift. All right? Illegal, that it's not legal to shift that. Example, incorrect. The outfielder began to run and suddenly stops. Notice that the action started in the past, but now it ends in the future and in the present, although the whole thing is happening in the past. And so this is illegal shift. And to correct it, we should change the stops to stopped, because both happened in the past.